Hello. How are you doing?
Hi. Sorry about
Hey,
being late.
Josh.
I honestly wasn't it got totally sidetracked doing something else. So
Don't even worry about it. Yeah, how are you doing?
I'm all right. I'm
You all
very
right?
I'm in an intense moment of work on many different projects at once. So it's yeah, I was hoping that several films that I'm working on right now would be done by now, but they're not done. So I'm a little bit, backlogged. But other
Yeah,
than that, things are fine. It's very beautiful here in New
I
York.
mean,
The fall has been wonderful. So
I know I just love watching the leaves change colors. But yeah, I can imagine you're super busy making all those beautiful films.
that's very nice of you. Where are you?
I'm in Seattle currently.
Okay, so yeah, nice.
Yeah, it's
I
quite a
don't
time
know.
difference.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm happy to help in
Sure.
any way I can.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So my first question is, what the fox is Josh Fox up to these days?
Well, what I'm up to is I have been making a film um, since really the beginning of the pandemic, March of 2020, called The Edge of Nature, which is about how, well, it's about me living in a one room cabin alone for 10 months during the beginning of the coronavirus. And all the things that I went through to sort of learn specifically about what it is to live on the planet in a way that was sort of divorced from technology and alone. And it's an inquiry into values of land and of the planet Earth. And we really ask the question, what is nature? Which seems like a
Yeah.
very strange question to ask if you're an environmentalist, but I think it's the most important and most fundamental question. And I'm not going to answer it on this. I made for the movie to come
Don't
back,
spoil it.
but I do have an answer. It's not the answer
Yeah.
you might expect, but I definitely have an answer to that after a year and a half of inquiry. So we spent a long time making the film, and we made some cuts of it, and I was so close to it, so on the inside of the experience of doing it, that I didn't understand that the movie wasn't working at all. So now we're like
Oh
totally
boy.
redoing the whole thing, and that's been a fun process. Person who I've known for a very long time, and we're trying to finish that movie. Um, Working on a movie about plastic in the ocean. So I'm very like, there's lots of
Awesome.
stuff going on. Project upcoming about about borders,
Right.
and specifically we're starting off with climate borders, but borders in general,
Okay.
and how borders in are everywhere in our civilization, not just between countries, but borders are in neighborhoods, borders are in cities, and those borders are also enforced.
Yeah,
Um,
it's true.
so that's something that I'm working on now too. So there's like a huge amount of things that are happening all at once.
Mean, I'm just really happy that you're spotlighting the most critical issues and things that people just overlook on a daily basis. So I hope,
Thank you.
wishing you the best of luck, and I hope all those projects get completed because
I
your
think they
work in
will.
Gasland, yeah, I hope so. So, my class and I watched this amazing movie, How to Let Go of a Dying Planet. And I want to
Oh,
know what the ultimate takeaway that you want viewers to walk away with after all this time, because it's been quite a while since you've made that film. But it was
you mean
absolutely
how to let go of the
beautiful.
world and love all the things climate can't change? That film.
Sorry. Yeah.
It's okay. That's I I think a lot about that movie. I think
Yeah.
that
Same here.
movie is a very is a very complex film for me. At the time, I was so immersed in the climate movement, and I was
Yeah.
so I still am, but I was working with Bill McKibben and working with Naomi Klein on the rallies to divest to create the divestment movement.
Right.
And at the same time, and those were very hopeful gatherings. We're going to beat the fossil fuel industry. We're going to get people to divest. This is action that we can take. And at the same time, I was talking to scientists who were incredibly dire in what their predictions were.
Yeah.
And I felt there was a dissonance between what scientists were telling me and where the climate movement was in terms of how we were pushing people to a certain positivity, because I think the idea was you cannot, unless you have hope, unless you feel positive, you can't act, which I think is true. If there's
I
definitely no
agree.
positive outcome, you don't get out of bed in the morning. It's just too depressing. But at the same time, I
Yeah.
think that there was some degree of, I felt a need to not do it in such a way that we're to try to push or own anyone's emotions.
Right.
Meaning, I didn't want to tell people what to feel good, feel bad, whatever. I just wanted to go through the prism and go through the looking glass myself. And I found that to be extremely distressing. So How to Let Go of the
Yeah.
World is really a movie about climate despair, which I think is very climate anxiety, these terms that you hear now. So I think it was really 5 years
Right.
ahead of its time, that film. If that movie came out now, it would be addressing that very phenomenon that people are going through now. So I was going through it then. um,
Right.
and so I think of it as a guide way to go through those emotions, because I think people feel a lot of despair. Um,
It's true.
it's worse now than ever, because we're seeing the impacts that are worse now than ever, right? We're seeing the droughts, the floods, the hurricanes, the massive extreme weather events. And so for me, that movie was about go through the emotion of it. Don't try to push it
Mhm.
away. Because I saw climate movies kind of in two camps. One, so depressing and scary and full of gloom that you wanted to just kill yourself at the end. There were a
Right.
lot of movies like that, like The 11th Hour or whatever, that were just like, I just can't go on after watching this movie. And then there were
Yeah.
movies that were the opposite, which were like completely rosy. Like, here's the renewable energy, here's the solution. Like, all we need to do is build a bunch of windmills and it's all fine, and like those seem to me extremely superficial. And so
Right.
I thought, I needed to make a film that felt honest, that felt like, we start off with beating the gas industry, and there's like this
Hmm.
great energy of like, all right, well, let's just take on climate and do that. And then the character, who is me or whatever, learns it's not so simple. And so
Right.
you get the whole like really depressing climate movie in the first 35 minutes of that movie, where it just crashes and burns, and then I throw the camera into the air, and I just decide I'm going to quit. And then there's really a second movie that starts, which is about, all right, well, now that we've gotten to this place of despair and hopelessness and feeling so terrible, what do we do now?
Hmm.
And finding crucial people who could help guide me in and guide the audience, I think, in that quest. And those are, of course, are Tim DeChristopher and Mika Maeva, and from and the incredible Amazonian indigenous environmental monitors who were with Anders, and all the people in the second, Aria Doe, and all the people in the second half of the film, who to me are like the Jedi. I mean, like they're the Return of the Jedi, like Gaslight Part 2 and How to Let Go of the World. And so it was really the
Yeah.
Return of the Jedi for me. Like, and who are these people? Who are the folks who are going to help guide us through to this next level of understanding and action, feeling full of emotion, feeling fully informed, but not Pollyannish, but
Right.
understanding that what I say at the end of the film, which is the world is lost and saved every day, not all at once. And I believe that. At the same time, like, now I'm watching this and I'm seeing this incredible youth movement, and I've been talking with Michael Mann, the scientist, and he's telling me that
Right.
there's new science that says that things can actually rebound and be better. So I really want to revise that movie and make it into a 12-hour epic, that spans like from then until now. I just haven't found a way to do that yet. But I think that there's new material, there's new science that is actually quite hopeful, more hopeful than it has been in
Right.
a while.
So after you finish those 7 projects, maybe you can go back and add on that trilogy.
Well, I would love to do it. And I think that it's something that if we do get people to subscribe to the subscriber platform, then we can hire some folks to help me kind of comb through that edit and make that work. But right now we don't have the money to do it.
I agree with you entirely. I don't think that like our emotions should be policed and that
Mhm.
um it's really difficult to grapple with the stuff, but I'm glad that you were able to like go through the motions first in order to bring your best selves to this issue. So To that end, I have another question that some say there's no point in voting, especially after watching their preferred candidates fail to perform to their expectations or bring in
Mhm.
desired changes. So, this question kind of tugs at a similar string. Why is the belief in building and creating a better future as a possibility so important? Like, why should people continue to think that matters?
Well, I mean, you can be completely nihilistic and decide to strap yourself to a bomb and, or like put rocks in your pockets and walk into the ocean. But like, if you're not actually trying to construct a positive future, then what you're doing is allowing ExxonMobil to construct their future, which is, I think, a bad
Yeah,
idea, right? And
of
not
course.
voting means you put people like Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump, who are white supremacists, who are fossil fuel bought and sold politicians, who are people who are going to do abuse women's rights, LGBTQ rights, and they're racists. These are people who you don't really want anywhere near you, let alone holding the levers of power, right? So giving up your
Right,
political power, you have to go beyond voting. You have to vote, and you have to understand that you wield enormous political power as a citizen in this society and as a person who can inspire anybody else to work in these ways, right? So
right,
giving up is just simply not an option. And as we see right now, look, there's a lot of people who were working with Bernie Sanders. I was one of them, who were devastated that we didn't get the nomination, that we couldn't take on Donald Trump, we couldn't win. And
right,
when Biden got the nomination, it was like, a lot of people were really angry. But now we're seeing the real problem, right? The real problem is Joe Manchin. The real problem
right.
is Kristen Sinema. The real problem is the Republican Party, right? So having
Yeah,
Joe Biden in there working with Bernie to try to get this real agenda passed, of
yeah,
FDR-like agenda passed, he's running into the way the Democrats sold out to the corporations and to the lobbyists for the last 20 years, right? We didn't see that, or longer than that. We didn't see that with Obama. We didn't see
right,
Obama pushing legislation that was progressive in the ways that Joe Biden is doing. And so therefore you didn't get to identify someone like Joe Manchin as the issue. So what do we need to do? We actually need to double down and get more involved and more invested, because
right.
the world needs conscious people who are going to fight for people, for humanity, for community, for economic justice, for racial justice, for environmental justice. Um, that's it's just simply, you can say, well, I'm too busy, or I have children, or I have obligations, or I have a job. Well, all that's true, but we also have an
Right,
obligation to each other, because the air and the water are what actually support your family, and the climate is what actually supports your family, and the fact that we have a planet is what actually supports your job. So unfortunately, at this moment in time, it's not enough to simply say, well, I'm just taking care of me, because that's not going to be good enough. You know what I mean?
I
We're
agree.
all in this together.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of exactly where I was trying to drive the question. But yeah, I'm glad you gave that answer. Um, so Mika, as you mentioned before, he really struck me as a vulnerable person. He recognized his limitations, but also persisted in the idea of keeping resilience no matter what. How has seeing this and interacting with Mika changed your perspective? Because I understand you went from despair to like, okay, no, we need to wake up.
You know, um, to a degree, when you focus on your own emotions,
Hmm.
you're being kind of selfish, right? Like if it's always about me and how do I feel, the thing about working on climate change is that we are always, um, we have to work with other people. And there's
Right,
something about Mika which is just so boundlessly full of energy and full of positivity just as a person. He's like a sunshiny person, you know what I mean? Like he's always smiling, he's always laughing, he's always singing, he's always making jokes. And that
yeah,
enough, that will just lift you up. And then but he doesn't do that out of a sense of like being shallow. He's actually extraordinarily deep person. So when you're around him, he's leading you as he is being alive. And I think that that's one thing that I also am good at, is just being alive and being awake and being open to circumstances. So we had a blast. You know,
Yeah.
we became very good friends very quickly, and we had a blast doing what we were doing. And although he was exploring some very dark things,
Yeah.
not, you know, the loss of his the birth tree into to the ocean, all the things that happened in that film.
Yeah.
But he says to me, like, how could you be these coal companies? That is just selfish. How could you not see that your actions are going to affect the rest of the world? And
Right.
I love that about that dialogue. And there's so much more of our conversation that I wish were in the film. You know, I wish that was like a whole hour of the film, which is all the things that we did in Samoa and in other places. But I think, you know, so what we have to understand is that I always have this rule about climate change. Um, you know, you're working on it when you've left your house, right? If you're still in your house, I mean, like obviously during coronavirus, it's a little bit different, right? But you have to
Yeah.
find, you have to get out of your house. You can't just work on it from home on your computer or whatever. And another basic rule is you're working on it when you're making friends, and you're working on it when you're with other people. Like that's how you know.
Right.
Like, and if it's not a positive experience where you're making friends and with other people having left your house, then you're not really working on climate change, right? So those are three
Yeah.
things that sort of tell you, like, am I actually working on it or not? And if those are, and because the other thing about it is like, that's also a mental health help. Because if you're working on it
Right.
alone and you aren't making friends and you aren't being happy and you aren't finding those ways, you know, then you're going to burn out pretty soon because you're not actually getting the support you need. So one
Right.
wonderful thing about that, about Mika and so many other folks that I've met along this journey, is that they give you support and we all give each other support. And the best relationships are the ones where you're mutually learning. So what I learned from Mika, you know, I learned that you can never despair. There's always something more to fight for. I learned that positivity is a kind of toughness. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like if you're positive all the time, you're the toughest person in the room. Meaning you're the one who is the most resilient, the most who is the most able to deal with all the things. Right? We think of toughness in our society as being tough, you know, but I think of it as the person who's just, you cannot stop them from smiling. So that's one another
Yeah.
thing that I learned from him. I mean, there's a million lessons, and I really would love to. I actually talked to him last year during the pandemic when he was in Samoa. He was just, you know, running his restaurant with his wife, and that's what he was up to. And you know, I have I really hope that the Pacific Climate Warriors and that Mika continue to make the impact on the world that they have had already.
God bless him. How about the kid? Because in the movie, I think he was
He's got
expecting.
two now, and I think he's
Oh,
got two now.
nice.
And um, we talked on Facebook Messenger. The band, so I don't think I put this into the movie, but the banjo that I play
Hmm.
in Tokyo, I bought it in Tokyo, and we went straight from Tokyo to Thailand to, not Tokyo, sorry, the banjo that I play in China,
China.
that I play
Yeah.
in the I bought it in China, but I play it at the solar factory.
Yeah.
And then I smuggled the hard drives out inside of it. And then I brought that to Samoa with me. And my plan was always to give it to Mika's son as a present. So I didn't include that in the movie, but I I inscribed it around the outside of it. I said something like, "This machine forces people to work on climate change," or something like this. And I left it for him. And apparently, the last I talked to Mika, I'm looking this up. You know, he had not given it yet to him because he was still too young, but he was about to
Oh,
give it to him. So we'll see, find out. But apparently, they're having a really good
yeah.
time. I mean, they
That
seem to
is
be, you know, you know, he seems to be doing okay. He's the kids seem to be doing okay.
that is
But you
such
can
a
watch
relief
an
to
interview
hear.
with him I did last year on Staying Home with Josh Fox. It's really fun interview actually.
I will. Thank you. Um, and just wrapping this up, because I know you're a very busy person, you've
Thank
had
you.
a lot of unique experiences in your background filming on climate change. You've obviously interacted with people from all sorts of backgrounds. What's a message that you desperately want society to know but find very difficult to get across, especially in the United States?
Well, you know, we're all brothers and sisters. We're all related. We all have to find ways of caring for each other and living with each other and working together. Um, and not just people, all the living things on the planet. The most difficult thing that I feel right now is that on the right, there's just misinformation and a lot of rage and violence.
Right.
And that's terrifying. And that has to be kept at bay. But on the left, I find that there's a misanthropy that is extremely destructive, and an incredible infighting that's happening, which also I find destructive. But in terms of the misanthropy, I think I hear things like all the time, like human beings are a virus and the planet Earth would be better off without humans. Well, that's nonsense. We are
Right.
the Earth's dream, just as, you know, pine trees are, and beavers and great white sharks and you know, parasites, and, you know, like nature is of not, I want to say nature, but the planet is an extraordinary workshop of organisms, both constructive, destructive, violent, peaceful. There's a whole gamut. But human beings have a very special place on the planet, which is that we can actually manage and take care of things. We can be in
Exactly.
co-creation with the planet rather than destruction of the planet. We can treat the planet as a partnership rather than as an extraction zone to be dominated. I think that the idea that we are a virus has its roots in the idea of dominion. I refuse to be defined as a human by those people who killed my ancestors. I refuse to be defined by Nazis. I refuse to be defined by, as a human, by the worst of the humans. You know,
Yeah.
when we say, you know, human beings cause climate change, well, that's not really true. I know that's what scientists have been pushing for, because they want people to understand that it is people, it is certain things that people do, but it's not all people.
Right.
The indigenous Amazonians are not causing climate change. You know, the farmers in Africa are not causing climate change. A very specific mindset is causing climate change. The mindset of colonialism, the mindset of dominion, the mindset of white supremacy, the mindset of extractivism. That's causing climate change. So we can't just say, humans are bad, and think that the definition of human are only those people.
Right.
You know, human beings have existed on the planet for several 100,000 years. But this experiment in this type of civilization, this type of ordering, this value system, which is what I'm getting at in How to Let Go of the World, right? The
Right.
values of this world that you want to let go of are greed, competition, racism, violence, extraction, incarceration. That's what we want to get rid of. But that can't be the definition of humanity. That's the definition of something that actually feels really inhuman. And that's what we have to focus on. That's what this new film is about. It's about how those values are what really have to be destroyed. And we have to come out with a different set of values, which is one of the things that I'm doing in How to Let Go, and talking about courage and innovation and creativity and love, and working together in human rights and revolution. So the ideas that are embedded in that movie, I think I'm trying to take that a step further by saying, you know, we have to start to understand that human beings are good for, right? If we say, oh, we're terrible for the planet, then there's nothing we can do. You understand? So we have to say to
Right.
ourselves, actually, we're meant to be here and we're good at being here. And what is the best of us? And that is to create and a respect and understanding for the land, for the earth, for biodiversity, for all living things. And if we can start to focus on the fact that we're totally capable of that, then we can see the path that's in front of us, right? If we say we're incapable of that, then yeah, we're in trouble. But we're not incapable of that. If we say that we're incapable of that, we say we're just a virus or a parasite, then we will encourage the worst parts of humanity. And then we will let ourselves off the hook of the responsibility for being the best that we can be. So that's what I'm really trying to get across.
Exactly. I agree with you 100% because we can change this issue and put our heads together and try to face the crisis as opposed to aversion. So, can you just give a shout out to Jennifer Atkinson and her students at the University of Washington taking the Eco Grief seminar? How do we soothe those feelings of overwhelming despair caused by the climate crisis?
Absolutely. I can give a shout out. Jennifer Atkinson. And
Yeah,
the
and
course is called Climate Grief,
yeah, it's
Eco
the Eco
Grief.
Grief seminar. Yep, at the
Wow.
University of Washington. So we watched your film in that
Okay.
class and all of us loved it.
Well, you're going to know my next film is going to be very important for this class. So the edge of nature. So we're going to talk about that. But listen, will you do me a favor?
Of
Can you
course.
also send me a copy of this that you've just made? Can I use it too?
Absolutely.
I would really
Yes, by all
appreciate it.
means.
Just copy of the video or the audio, whatever, because I think it's interesting. You know, I do this talk show, and maybe one of the episodes of the show should be somebody interviewing me for a change. So we'll see. Maybe I'll use it.
Right. I would love to see my interview if you go somewhere.
So
Thank you so
tell me
much.
your name and your how you want to be introduced.
My name is Diana Danoon, and I'm Stephen Donziger's media assistant, but most importantly, an undergraduate student at the University of Washington. And it was a
Fantastic.
pleasure speaking with you.
Absolutely. And my Don Zigger's interview is coming out, I think tomorrow. It'll be soon. And
Awesome.
cool. Well, I mean, I would love to know more about what you're doing. Uh, you know, I also need a media assistant. I don't know if you're available, but definitely this is a great start. So thank you so much, and we'll talk again soon when I'm a little bit less crazed.
Yeah, I'll send this over to you and
Thank you. Talk about it more then. Okay. A lot of people
yeah,
do
yeah, for
volunteer to
sure.
help me, but then they don't come through.
Oh
But you don't seem
no,
like that kind of person.
no.
Anyway, I would love to tell you more about it, and I definitely shout out your class and all your classmates,
Yeah.
and thanks for being persistent. And I really appreciate these questions. It made me really think again about those projects, and um, yeah, I that's a fascinating moment. Every movie is really just a snapshot of where you are at that
Right.
moment, right? So you can look back at them and
Mhm.
go, "Oh, I wish I had done this. I wish I had done that." Blah, blah. But then you have to realize, like, no, 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 just move on and go to the next movie. But I really think that film, though, there's such a richness in that movie that I really want the
Yeah.
big, long 12-hour version of it to come out. And if you are a subscriber on Climate Revolution, we are putting out pieces of that extra footage from that film all the time. So tell your class that there's a lot more there, and it's there. You can either do it for free or you can subscribe for $5 a month, which helps us. But it's also free if you want, if you need that too.
What's the channel called again?
It's Josh hyphen Fox dot ghost.io. So it's
Okay.
I can it's on my it's in the link in my bio on my Instagram. So you'll see there's a whole lot of
Awesome.
other segments from that film there as we're putting out little bits at a time.
I will definitely check it out and spread the word. But yeah, we'll chat later and thank you so much for answering these questions. It's just
Got
gonna
it.
go for the research project. And yeah, I hope you have a
All right.
wonderful rest of your night.
Thanks, Diane. It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
All right.
See you later.
Well, I'll be in touch.
Bye.
Thanks.